Some stories make you shiver. Some make you question what's real. Here you'll get both. Welcome to Eerily Entertaining, where the strange, the chilling, and the unexplained come to life. This occurred in 2017 and is 100% true. Due to a multitude of factors, including a recent death of a close friend, I was unbearably depressed at this time in my life. For that reason, my family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was the off-season. It was late November. The weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty, besides locals and a few straggling tourists, such as ourselves. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island, so we immediately checked into our motel, though that word hardly does the place justice. I call it a motel because all the doors to the rooms exited to the outside, but in actuality, our room was one of 20 to 30 quaint guest house-looking buildings, arranged in sort of a horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you'd reach the room we were given, essentially on the corner, before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path lead back to the street, the other further into the secluded maze of rooms. Stay with me. After a day of exploring, and having just finished dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Similarly dark was my headspace after the dinner conversation. Took a left-hand turn, and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them I just needed to go to sleep. And I did immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mom saying my name, a harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds, my parents' bed closer to the door and mine further in the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her, considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over. "What?" I asked, as my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming in through the curtains. I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who was she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking, to see a hooded figure in all black, standing over their bed. My mom's words became low and severe as she said my dad's name in a dire voice I've never heard her use before. Then the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards us, but instead crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regards to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew 2 things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and it's not acting in any sort of way that I can understand. As opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago, the series of events that unfolded when my hulking ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly, we were out the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom was screaming, "Get him! Get him!" My dad was running down one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through sheer adrenaline, "I'm going to fucking kill you." I ran down the other path, towards the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder, but it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad, quietly walking back, his head low. He gets really close to me, and I hear him say, "It's a fucking kid." The explanation, some young teen, tall and lanky, as I am in my 20s, wearing all black, including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room. Our room. The one time my parents just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he entered, and seeing a tall person in a black hoodie, thought he was me, assumedly leaving the room in a depressive episode, and when the hooded figure crouched, that was him realized. His mistake and panicking. He was scared of us. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugs this kid, who is now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me with murder in his eyes. To set the tone, I always hated the town I lived in. I moved there alone when I was 18 for college and quickly regretted it. It was a decent-sized town, but full of not decent people. Nearly every gas station was robbed frequently. There were shootings in broad daylight, robberies, you name it. Well, for the first 3 years, I lived with roommates on a side of town that wasn't awful, but it was sketchy. So when I was making decent enough money, I moved out on my own. The house was tiny, maybe 500 square feet, if that, super old and poorly built. It was just me living there, so I didn't mind how small it was. But what originally sold me was that it was in the middle of nowhere. It was surrounded by a bunch of fields and some wooded areas, with only a few houses nearby. Considering I hated being in the town due to the continuous paranoia of getting mugged or shot, I loved the idea of living out there. So at the beginning of July, I moved in. Everything seemed super swell, minus not being able to get good internet. A month goes by, and everything is still swell to me, and I decided to get a dog to keep me company. He also loved the place, and spent long amounts of time lounging about the yard and trying to convince the nearest neighbor to walk over and pet him. Important later. Roughly 2 months into living there, I started to notice things out of place. Something to note is that an old roommate of mine was using my spare room as a storage space until he got moved himself, so he had a key, but was never there. He just kind of popped in once every other week to grab something, and usually let me know beforehand. But I'd come home to my kitchen chair being pulled away from my table, or a bowl in the sink, things like that. They were such small things, I wrote it off as my roommate swinging by, or just stuff I was forgetting. But then my dog developed this crazy bad separation anxiety. Up until now, he didn't even care. When I left, he'd just lay on the couch and chew his toys. He never barked, never did anything weird. However, all of a sudden, he began acting really awful. Every time I tried to leave, he'd literally cram his body through the door as I was closing it, screaming and barking, and wouldn't stop until I came back in the house. He didn't want me to leave him there alone, at all. I couldn't afford a kennel for him yet, so I decided one day that I'd put a movie in while I was out, thinking maybe the sound of people talking might keep him calmed down. I only had to finish one task up at work and knew I'd be home early, so I put in a copy of Hamlet. I know boring, but I chose it because the copy I have is 5 hours long. I knew it would be playing when I came back. Flash forward 3 hours, long before Hamlet should have been over. But when I walked in the door, not only was the movie not playing, but the TV and the Xbox were completely off. I immediately called my roommate and asked if he had been over, and he wasn't even in town. I explained the TV situation to him, and he shrugged it off as the TV powering off when it idles for a while. Even though this is true, there are several reasons I know this isn't the case. It wasn't idling. A 5-hour movie was supposed to be playing. 2. Even if it had shut off, my Xbox wouldn't have. I have left it on by accident for weeks. I was gone out of town or whatever, and it was still on when I came home. Always. But it was completely powered down this time. The weird thing is none of my stuff was missing, and the door was locked when I entered. I eventually convinced myself that it was something weird with the Xbox or whatever, and shrugged it off. That is until my dog started acting even weirder. Remember earlier I mentioned he used to play with the neighbor? Well, all of a sudden, if she even walked by the house, while he was out, he'd start yelping and running at me away from her. This was incredibly weird to me, and made me incredibly cautious of her. I put some cheap alarms on my doors, the kind that go off when the door is opened, and slept with my pistol handy. The second night the alarms were on my doors, I was woken up by the one on the back door going off. I flew out of bed with my pistol, trying to convince myself that I was about to shoot some intruder. But once I got to the door, it was shut, and there was nobody there. The alarm had been knocked all the way across the room. The door would have had to open for it to be chucked like that. It couldn't have fallen off and landed there. Something else weird. The door was locked, but not the way I had locked it. I always locked the knob and the deadbolt, but upon checking my lock after this, only the doorknob was locked. The police wouldn't do much, as I had no witnesses, no lead, and they didn't have much to go on. Needless to say, I changed the locks. I didn't have any noticeable problems inside after that, but later found out that the close neighbor that my dog hated had previously lived in the house I was renting, and the locks had never been changed. I have no way to prove my theory, but it's pretty obvious. She had a key and was coming and going as she pleased. Why, though, I can't figure out. Nothing of mine ever went missing. The most unsettling part for me, though, is that she had tried to come in at night until the alarm scared her off. How many times has she been in my house at night while I was asleep? And why? When I was 11, we, my single mom, 9-year-old sister, and 6-year-old brother, moved into a beautiful older craftsman-style house. I'd heard it was around 80 years old back then, in 1984. Soon after we moved in, we found out it was infested with cockroaches. I've never seen anything like it. You'd turn on the lights at night, and they'd scatter. From every surface, we had to store all our food that wasn't canned in the fridge, so they wouldn't get into it. We tried bug bombs and professional exterminators numerous times, with no effect. Those things really can survive a nuclear war. Anyway, they weren't the reason we lived in the house, less than a year before fleeing for our lives. I just thought it was an interesting side story. To this day, roaches are near the top of my most detested bugs list. I remember my mom discussing our next-door neighbor's creepy son with my grandma. He was in his 20s or 30s. She'd been doing dishes one day and looked up to see him standing directly on the other side of the kitchen window, staring in at her. Normally she would have kept something scary like this from us kids, but about that time she told us to tell her if we ever saw him near the house, and we weren't allowed to play outside. She also told us about a couple of times when she woke up to see him standing over her bed, and one time he put a cloth with chemicals over her face to knock her out. This is the part of the story I know the least about, since she didn't tell us about it until years later. I think she might have thought she was dreaming, especially if he was drugging her. I don't know if anything else happened. I've never asked her about it in case something did, and it brought up bad memories. So one afternoon, we were all doing some spring cleaning when my brother said he found a cigarette butt in the upstairs toilet. Weird, Since nobody in our family smokes, being a dumb little 6-year-old, he flushed it before telling our mom. I still remember her trying to get the entire story out of him, being upset that the evidence was gone and thinking he might have been mistaken, or maybe he'd picked up a butt somewhere outside out of curiosity. She soon dropped it, and we mostly forgot about it. I think it was a few weeks later, my brother was spending the night at our grandparents', and my sister and I were the only ones upstairs. Our mom's bedroom was downstairs. My sister heard a sound, like a screen door slamming, but she insisted it came from in the house, and she was freaked out. I told her it was just from outside, and to go to sleep. A minute later, we heard a strangled cough coming from just outside our bedroom door. A man's cough, and sounded like he was trying to keep from making noise. I whispered that we needed to get downstairs. We sneaked out of the room, and I had the irrational urge to turn on the light in the bathroom, which was just across the hall from our bedroom, and check to see if anyone was there. Then just as strong of a feeling to get away from the bathroom and get downstairs now. The scariest moment of my life was when we were creeping down the stairs in the pitch black. It was a spiral enclosed stairway with walls, the perfect place for someone to hide. The stairway light was burned out, and the wood steps were creaky, so it was terrifying making our way down. We got downstairs and woke up our mom, panicked that there was a guy upstairs in our bathroom. She started to tell us to go back to bed, but could see we were seriously scared. She went over to the bottom of the stairway to go up and show us there was nothing to be scared about. Then she had just as strong of a feeling to close the stairway door and lock it now. She did, called the cops. They found nothing and didn't really take us seriously. The next day, she called a PD detective friend of hers from high school to come over and inspect the house. Remembering the cigarette butt in the toilet, she had him look at the upstairs bathroom window. It was a high, narrow, rectangular window, not very big, but just wide enough for a person. Who knows how many times the intruder climbed our roof to get in, and was upstairs while we were sleeping across the hall. The window swung up on hinges. When my mom's friend let the window drop, it sounded like a screen door slamming. He said the locks on all the windows were so old, they were practically useless, and we needed to get out of the house immediately. We moved into my grandparents' house that day. When my mom went with her brothers a few days later to pack up some things, a back door had been smashed open, but nothing in the house was disturbed. I've edited to clarify why it seemed like my mom was in denial about the guy going into her room. I'm honestly not clear on the details, since she never told us much about what she saw. I think she might have been out of it because of the chloroform and probably thought she was imagining it. The puzzle pieces came into place after the detective checked out our house and confirmed someone was breaking in. As soon as she knew we were in real danger, she got us out immediately. A few years later, we heard the neighbor's son was arrested for rape and attempted murder. I still wonder what might have happened if I had turned on that bathroom light, if my mom didn't lock the stairway door, or if we didn't leave the house when we did. I also wonder if it's still infested with cockroaches. Thank you for watching and listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share these stories with someone who thinks they sleep too easily at night. Sweet.